Here is Josh's speech and his audience. Take it away, Josh.
Imagine having a military leader with the capability to have an entire state burned and destroyed. That's exactly what one man and his men did. According to an article on History.com, this is exactly what happened to the state of Georgia in 1864. This happened because of one man, William Tecumseh Sherman, who was not only a smart, well-rounded man, but someone who also happened to be an excellent military leader. William Sherman was born on February of 1820 in Ohio. He was one of 11 children and a part of a distinguished family. But when he was only 9, his father passed away, which forced him and his family to live with their relatives. According to an article written by Jim Vaughn, during this time, Sherman stayed with Senator Thomas Ewing, who was able to get Sherman into the United States Military Academy. Sherman would end up graduating in 1840, ranking 6th in his class. He excelled in the academic side of his training, but was against West Point's strict set of rules. While he was set up to be successful, his early military career was anything but. According to an article on History.com, he saw some combat during the Second Seminole War in Florida, but unlike many of his colleagues, he did not fight in the Mexican-American War, and yet was serving in California instead. Because of this, he ended up resigning from the military in 1853. After a brief period of time off from the military, he joined back in 1859, working in Louisiana. When he was there, he served as the superintendent of the Louisiana Military Academy. He proved himself to be a solid leader and one that his men respected. Sherman's first action on the battlefield was a success, even in defeat. It was at the Battle of Manassas, and although the Union was defeated, his performance caught the attention of President Abraham Lincoln. He was quickly promoted to a brigadier general in August of 1861. And after that, he was then assigned the task of going to Kentucky and preventing them from seceding from the Union. After the first couple of years of the war, Sherman would begin to show his true potential. At the Battle of Chattanooga, Sherman faced off against Confederates in a fierce contest at the Missionary Ridge that resulted in a victory for the North. After that battle, Ulysses S. Grant was promoted to commander of all United States armies, and this led to Sherman becoming the commander of all troops west of the Mississippi River. This led to warfare that would bring him great, underrated notoriety in history. According to the book, The Stress of War, Sherman's stated purpose was demonstrating to the Confederates that war and individual ruin were synonymous terms. The Confederate Army in Tennessee was the first to feel the impact of Sherman's presence. Sherman's army was not only much larger and better skilled than the Confederate Army, but he was able to keep the Confederates unsure of his location. He made the Confederates believe he was headed somewhere that he had no intention of ever being at. By this point in the war, Sherman was convinced that the preservation of the Union depended not only on defeating the Confederates on the battlefield, but more importantly, being able to destroy the Confederacy's material and psychological will to wage war. In order to accomplish this, he felt he needed to bring total destruction upon a civilian population. By September of 1864, Sherman was commanding 3 armies and was able to capture Atlanta, Georgia. After that, he split his men up, with half of them going back to fight in Tennessee, and the other half going on an offensive march through Georgia. Once Sherman and his men were set on destruction, no one was going to stop them. His main goal was to deprive the South of their resources and means of transportation. He was willing to do anything to get that done. He wanted to make sure life was so unbearable for the people of Georgia that they would have no other option but to surrender. They began to raid several farms and plantations, taking as much food and resources as possible. According to an article written by Jim Vaughn, they also destroyed tunnels and bridges, expending particular effort to make railroad tracks unusable. This would cut off any means of transportation that would be meaningful for the Confederates and would play a big impact for the rest of the war. Whatever they were not able to take with them, they ended up burning and left behind. By December of 1864, Sherman and his men arrived at the unguarded city of Savannah, Georgia. From there, they continued their rampage up through Georgia and all the way to Charleston, South Carolina. In the end, Sherman's march accomplished exactly what it set out to do. The effects it had on the Confederacy's resources, morale, and overall war efforts was huge. And as you can see here, this was the route they took up through Georgia on the march, and this was a depiction of what it would have been like when they were setting blaze to everything in their path. Sherman's leadership abilities helped push forward his men and helped them to become more successful on the battlefield. He knew what needed to be done in order to achieve victory, and he knew what steps needed to be taken along the way. The impact he left for this country is still felt to this day, simply because how he conducted himself and how he was able to be so successful during stressful times. A lot of people know about the Civil War, but not a lot of people know the name William Tecumseh Sherman. They don't really know who he is or what he did. He doesn't need people to write his legacy. He wrote it himself.